Hey, I'm Nikki, and this is how to get real-time guest feedback during your tour. Real-time guest feedback is just so valuable, and it's so easy to get. It's not only a guide's best strategy for turning around the experience for a guest whose expectations haven't been met, but it's also a really easy and shockingly underutilized way to do market research for free. You can get all sorts of information like, are you hitting the right demographic with your product and marketing? Or what other activities your guests are booking during their trip? Or where did your guests book your tour and why they chose that platform? Why did your guests choose your tour over the other ones available, etc.? And not to mention in the times of global pandemics, it's also an excellent way to make sure your guests feel safe during your experience. Or more realistically, as I have been experiencing, learn what safety elements your guests do not really care about or aren't concerned about as you go throughout the tour. So in this article, I will outline 4 easy ways to get real-time customer feedback that can all be done with the resources you already have. So 4 ways to get feedback during your tour. The first 2 are for guides specifically. First, you can ask guests midway how they're enjoying the tour. Seems obvious, but checking in on your guests halfway through the tour is something I recommend every guide does regardless. It's just a great way to identify those silent, dissatisfied guests. You know the ones I'm talking about. They don't make any comments, they smile, they don't ask any questions, but then the next day you get a request for a refund. It's like, why? What happened? At what point? It just shows great customer service. Guides don't often do it. A lot of the tours I've been on, I would say the majority, this doesn't happen. So it shows really, really great customer service and people really appreciate it. So as a bonus though, you can also snag information about what the guests thought they were signing up for, right? And this is the market research. So doesn't have to be a big deal or anything formal. You could do it very casually, simply slipping in this question while chatting with your guests between stops, right? For example, how's the tour going for you so far? Is it what you were expecting? That's it. That's all you have to say. You can either do it one-on-one, again, chatting while you're in between stops, or even ask your group all at once. You have them sitting down maybe, you're waiting for the food to come on a food tour. Just kind of ask, so how's it going? Is this what you thought you signed up for? You'll be surprised how honest people are willing to be. They'll tell you the truth, for better for worse, and it's just really easy to get this information. Second thing you can do. Ask what they loved most at the end of the tour. So this is something I actually recommend to do if you are putting in the effort to create special moments or peaks, as I've talked about before. It's a great way to see whether they're working or if you're just starting to create moments. It's a great way to figure out where to get started. But simply ask at the end of your tour, what about today's tour will you remember the most? And again, this is something you can do when there's dead space towards the end. Maybe you're, waiting for the final boat to come, or you're seeing them off, right? It's your last stop, you're sitting in traffic. What will you remember the most, right? And you just have them go around. It prompts people to share positive memories, right? You're not asking, what did you hate about today? You're asking what they'll remember most. So most likely it is a positive, happy memory. And it's just a great way to end your tour on a high note with everyone reminiscing about their favorite parts of the tour. They go right away walking thinking, wow, that really was an amazing tour, right? But more importantly, it also tells you what stood out to them and what didn't, right? So if you have crafted this tour with this underlying theme that's very, political, and you want them to come away really thinking about things, but if they come out of it and they're like, oh, my favorite part was that park with all the cute dogs, then maybe your point isn't getting across, right? It's just a good way to kind of see what they are getting out of the tour. Okay, so the next 2 are for managers. Things managers can do, or guides in some cases. make sure to send a survey post-tour. Again, this one seems obvious. Your survey doesn't have to be fancy. Not everyone will fill it out. That's okay. But I think every company should still be sending that post-tour survey with at least the NPS score, right? Which is the question, how likely are you to recommend this tour to a friend on a scale of 1 to 10, the Net Promoter Score. It's the easiest way you can internally measure your guest satisfaction. But you should also add a few other questions in. Not too many. You don't want to make it several pages long, but maybe a couple, again, 1 through 5. How did you find the guide's knowledge? Cleanliness, right? Hygiene. That's something that actually I think is important to track. Your guide showing up in their branded gear. Is it clean? Is it ironed if need be? Then obviously the quality of the tour. Did they find it enjoyable? Did they find it worth the money? Was it valuable? Did it meet their expectations? Again, only a few, but kind of pick out what you want to track. So now whether you send that, a lot of companies send out personal thank you emails from the guides, which I've talked about before. I highly recommend if you want a 5-star review. But I'm a big fan of an extra automated email from the company because then it doesn't look like too much. Like everyone's expecting that automated email. So if the guide sends you a personal one, it's just a bonus. But in that automated email, it can be a copy and paste. It can auto send. And it can just be a link to obviously a review and that survey. I think that's the most appropriate way to collect it. And finally, take your own tours. Physically go on your tours. It baffles me how rarely managers hop on their tours. I'd say the minority of the companies I've worked with on a regular basis physically hop on their tours. It is the easiest way to get data straight from your customers. And yes, it takes 2-3 hours of your time. But again, I say this all the time. I've been on so many tours. All I have to do on that tour is tell a guest I'm evaluating the guide or experience, right? Like I say, oh, what made you choose? I'll be like, well, I'm here for work. Work for the company and just kind of, and I often don't have to say more than that. They'll immediately jump to the conclusion. They'll be like, oh, so you're checking out the tour. And then for the rest of the trip, whether or not I want it, they're giving me all their live feedback, right? They'll come and be like, I didn't really like that stop, or, I think this guide is fantastic. I'm telling you, all I have to say is I work for the company, and that information just falls into my lap. It's also so easy to casually chat with guests on a tour. It's what you do. You socialize, right? It's part of the tour. So when chatting, you get all this other information, like what other activities they booked, why they chose this particular tour, and what they think of this tour compared to others they've gone on. It just comes up in conversation. You don't have to formally survey them. You could just say, oh, what else are you doing this trip? Book any other cool tours? Have you been on a walking tour before? Simple prompts like this make it very natural, and they're very happy to give you that information. I also really believe this is the only way you're going to see your tour in action. And it's necessary. Tours evolve naturally. And I think you should be hopping on your tours once a season to make sure that that natural progression and evolution isn't diverting from your brand, right? I cannot say this enough. And I wrote an article about this last week. Please do not rely on your 5-star reviews to tell you how good your tours are. Customers have no idea what makes a good tour. And the bar is pretty low across all the tours I've taken. So they're going to say this was great, but their standards hopefully will be much lower than yours. So you should really hop on those tours. And obviously as a bonus, you're then able to see your guides in action, right? I know it's really hard to evaluate guides. I'm actually going to write about this soon. But a trick that I use is whenever I'm on a tour, whether it's true or not, I tell the guides I'm just gathering customer data, right? All this stuff I've just shared. I explained to the guide ahead of time. So I'm going to be on your tour, just so you know, I'm going to be chatting to customers. This is what I'm looking to get out of it. So that way they don't feel like I'm there like taking notes, watching them, even if I am kind of curious what they're doing as well, right? So please hop on your tours and get that customer feedback.